All right, good to go.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, tonight for joining us for our first Read Ballarat of 2024. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we live and learn, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging, and any Indigenous people here with us today. We're off to a real bumper of a start with Read Ballarat tonight. I'm so excited to be able to introduce Patrick Ellis, who is the Education Lead at the Catholic Education Canberra-Goulburn office. And Patrick has been a principal and in leadership roles across Catholic education for well over 20 years. And Brad Gaynor, who has worked in a range of small and large schools across Canberra for over 30 years with 20 years experience as a school principal. And he's also heavily involved in the National Principals Associations. It's really exciting to be able to hear about their study tour and visiting Michaela Community School, but also the work with Catalyst. And I was just talking to Patrick earlier, and Catalyst is an amazing project with huge impact of 56 schools, impacting 1,700 teachers and 22,000 students, city and country schools, small and large. I really love the simplicity of the drivers behind Catalyst, being every child a reader and evidence-based practice in every classroom. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us this afternoon.
Great to be here, no problems.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks for the introduction. Now I'll just share my screen, and it worked twice previously. So let's hope that it works this time around. All right, can everyone see that? All good? All right, well, thank you, everybody. And yes, as I said, thank you for the introduction. Brad and I are very pleased to be here and have heard the great things that is happening with Read, and so really keen to be able to share a little bit of our takeaways from our journey over to the UK, and hopefully this is the beginning of a conversation where we can collaborate and learn and visit, and we're really keen to be able to connect with your network. So I won't go into our introductions necessarily. It's already been done, but just to note that both myself and Brad work in Catholic Education Canberra-Goulburn in our archdiocese. And part of that is a really core focus in Catalyst, which I'll just quickly frame before we dive into it. It was mentioned around our school, just a context. So it was mentioned 56 schools. We have 9 early learning centres, over 1,700 teachers and over 22,000 students who we impact every day and who we serve in the office. And Catalyst is a real driving force in how we're serving our teachers and leaders and students and their families across our system with teaching and learning. So just in a couple of slides very quickly, because I'm sure that many of you have heard about Catalyst and the work that we're doing, and it aligns very closely, I'm sure, with a lot of the work that you're doing in your schools. But for us, it's a real focus across our whole system with curriculum, pedagogy and assessment. We're drawing from the science of learning and science of reading to inform all of our decisions relating to teaching and learning. We've now been working with our schools with Catalyst over the last 3 years. So just a name given to a program for us to unify us as a system with a common approach. So we're moving into our 4th year. We do have those 2 bold goals that were mentioned: every student a competent reader and high impact teaching practice visible in every classroom. So all work, all activity that occurs across our schools relating to teaching and learning and professional learning associated with that needs to align to these 2 goals. And so we're working towards these. And part of that is really important, and a really clear message that we keep at centre with all that we do is that the teacher is the most important learner in the system. Of course, we all do what we do because of the students in our care and in our classroom every day, and we want to see success and student learning outcomes improve. But our theory of change within Catalyst, if we focus on the teacher, wrap around all the support that we possibly can, provide the resources that we can, the professional learning, do as much heavy lifting for teachers to make their job as easy as possible so that they can teach most effectively and most efficiently. So that's our role and what we do. And part of that is really ensuring that we're continuing to learn and continuing to challenge ourselves to make sure that we are moving in the right direction and maintaining the momentum that has built across our system and supporting those 1,700 teachers. Prior to Catalyst, we had the opportunity to participate in some evidence forums, visiting schools across the country to help us in the design phase of Catalyst to understand what decisions schools were making by themselves and how we could scale that in a whole system. And so fortunate that sort of now that we've implementing Catalyst and doing the work with schools, we have the opportunity to then start to branch out internationally and see what we could learn from the UK, specifically from England, over their sort of 10-year journey and to where we find them now. And what were the sort of barriers that they faced, what were the enablers, and where we could draw connections and really strengthen the relationship with those that are in the science of learning space over there, and for ourselves, and to network and learn and collaborate together. So part of that was the opportunity to really tap into some key minds over there. We had the opportunity to have a meeting with Nick Gibb and talk to him from the political policy side in his role as Minister of State of Schools, so essentially Education Minister, and really connect with his passion and him drawing from the evidence and listening to those passionate people and experts in the science of learning and cognitive science, and so that was really fascinating. And we can talk about that a bit more. Amanda Spielman, former Chief Inspector for Ofsted, she finished at the end of last year and was out here recently. It was very interesting to talk to her about the reforms that have taken place and the work of Ofsted whilst sort of more the regulatory inspectorial space. Very interesting around the frameworks that were put in place, which particularly around curriculum that sort of tend to drive some of the pedagogical change that occurred over there. Tom Rees was the Executive Director of Programs at Ambition, has moved on from there now, but it was very interesting connecting with Tom, particularly around leadership and the leadership, how important leadership is, which isn't a surprise to anybody, I think, on the call, how important leadership is to drive change and to embed and maintain that change. Emma McRae, great to chat to her, all things curriculum, her passion for curriculum design and delivery, and the work that Oak have done over there, very similar to the pathway of OCA in Australia. But yeah, connecting with her was excellent. And then also got to connect with some other real experts and people that you would know. So I had the pleasure to meet Paul Kirshner and really his passion and around cognitive science and how learning happens, and sure we've all read his work, was great. Tom Sherrington, of course, you would all know, and particularly for us within Catalyst, when we talk HRTP, we're essentially drawing from Rosenshine's principles of instruction. So it was great to connect with himself. Daisy Christodoulou, great, Peps and Josh as well, and still have an ongoing connection with all of them to help inform the refinements and iterations of Catalyst as we learn more, we know more, we do better, and so we just are continuously refining and pushing ourselves forward to ensure that we can provide the best quality teaching and learning across our schools and support our teachers. Part of that was visiting two schools, just to really centre in on Arczone and Michaela, both incredible schools. So you would know of Michaela, has been around for a little while now, I think about 9 years or so. Arczone was only a couple of years, but a lot of the teachers from Michaela had moved over to Arc, so there was sort of a baby Michaela or a mini Michaela, but some exceptional practice, which I'll unpack some of the learning from us from visiting those two schools. And then we've got some key takeaways more holistically in the trip, but drawing from both of these school visits that Brad will dive into later as well, and then we can answer any questions. So some of this won't be new for you, I'm sure, but just to unpack, because this was consistent across both schools, and was just at another level that I've never seen before. Really quite incredible. So in terms, and I'll just quickly unpack these for you. Some you'll recognise from Teach Like a Champion, Douglas Moss' work, and others. We know where they draw their inspiration from, the same places we draw our inspiration from, and I'm sure many of you draw your inspiration from. So it won't be as a surprise, but this was consistent across both. So the entry routines were just very precise. So across both schools, it was the greetings, it was the eye contact as well, it was silence, and often you hear about the silent corridors, but and that gets a bit of the attention, but it was just the space that provided to really maximise every single learning opportunity within the school from the start of the day till the end of the day. So it wasn't necessarily around the silence, but it was so to maximise learning, and it was also to provide that consistency across the school. So it wasn't walking quietly, because interpretations, depending on the teacher, what quietly means, it was silent. The exit routines, same thing, and down to the attention to detail around how the booklets or exercise books were passed back to the teacher. So the way that they went down the row and the way that who collected those. So no opportunities for off-task behaviour to occur, even when you were packing up the classroom. It was very consistent, and standing behind chairs and waiting for the teacher to dismiss that class, and ready to walk out the door on the bell. Instructions, really specific, broken down, observable, really sequential in terms of the instructions were given to in the order that they should be followed. It was timed, everything was timed, really to make sure again that they're maximising those learning opportunities, and lots of cues. So lots of, we refer to and do a lot in engagement norms and participation tactics, same sort of thing. Slant you would be aware of with some of the Teach Like a Champion stuff, but that was, again, another level, sort of 3-2-1 slant, and it was precision across all the classrooms we've visited across both schools. There was work focusing on merits and demerits across both sites, and issuing those demerits as a reminder to correct behaviour, and giving the merits to stamp the good behaviour, and lots of focus on the oracy and really sort of narrating everything that was happening. So narrating why they'd been awarded, or the reasons why there was a demerit put in place. Lots of positive framing, narrating the positive, what's gone well, and lots of sort of that great focus start by Brad. So really being really clear with the positive behaviour that wanted to be seen, and the positive expectations. They talked about control the game and rule reading. So things like when they were reading, it was two hands on a ruler and following the text. It was changing readers that were reading out loud to sort of create the pace and the accountability that they wanted to see. They obviously factored in student reading ability, and you could see when they asked students to read aloud or choral response or whatever it might have been, that you could see the teachers responding accordingly based on student ability, and obviously no opt-out either, which is quite similar I'm sure for many of you. So just really active participation and non-volunteers. And even when their students wanted to perhaps opt out, there were things like talk us through your thinking, or I'll come back to you and bounce to another student type of thing. Lots of turn of talk, really short and snappy, all had been set up so there was no wasting time with who your partner is. And again, I'm sure a lot of stuff that I'm saying that you do, I say, you say, lots, and with hand signals, lots of gesturing, choral response, and, you know, with lots of coming back to it if it wasn't done in unison, or if it wasn't done with enthusiasm, the teacher would swing back around and say, we're going to do that again. Shape, they focused on, so that was full sentence answers, you know, hands away from face, articulate, project, and eye contact. So there was lots of that, lots of talking loud and proud in their responses, and, you know, let's try that again, 30% louder, you know, those sort of the directions, and then just be seen looking. So, you know, teachers were strategically placed in classrooms where they would move. You could tell they were really aware of their proximity. They were scanning classrooms. They knew exactly what was happening in their room, and they were really standing to command in the classroom and teaching first from the front of the room. So that was, yeah, it was quite incredible, and student engagement was very high. And we had opportunities to talk to students about the learning that was taking place at the school, and the teaching, and the teachers' practice. So that was interesting as well. And we can talk about that. So these were just some sort of expectations across the schools, where they had slant you'd be aware of, and shape and steps. So really, and this was consistent across teachers. Every single teacher that we would walk into their classroom or see in a corridor or on the playground, or at the start of the day, this was really, really consistent across the board. Both schools also focused a lot on knowledge organisers, and you might be familiar with. This one was from a secondary context. So really making sure the key knowledge, concept, facts, vocab was all essentially on a knowledge organiser that they kept to one page. And they were all done for teachers. So before that unit was taught, then that teaching team would review, but essentially it's all done for them. You can't see clearly on the right hand side there, but the lesson. So the lessons were all created for the teachers as well, and, you know, down to line items, so that they can revise the questions that were asked. That was all created. So teachers just essentially picked that up, and they did that all internally. They had curriculum groups, and they had curriculum reviews and refinements, and a lot of work that had gone into place for both, with that sort of high level of expectation. And I've got a primary example there as well. Again, just those key knowledge, concept, facts, vocab, and interestingly, you know, these knowledge organisers would then go home. Sort of that's the unit overview, essentially. Encouraged to stick on the fridge and, you know, to practice that at home. And so parents were supporting children with what they needed to know in a particular unit or subject area. So just really, you know, those from both schools, it was around the consistency, the expectation, not only the expectation for the students, but the expectation of the teachers. So if you work here, this is what's expected of you. And then there was consistency with the delivery, actually with the design and the delivery of every single curriculum area, and that we saw there was that precision, so real attention to detail, and they kept, teachers and the leaders kept saying that, the attention to detail matters. So if you let something slide, then then you have to expect that's going to continue to happen. If you don't want that to occur, you don't want that particular behaviour to occur, or you want something changed in practice to the school, in the teaching practice, you want something changed in the curriculum, then you need to show that as a priority, and the details matter. And then just the clarity, they really easily understood. If things were really well rehearsed, there was lots of scaffold. It was really clear from any teacher that you spoke to, leader, even the students that were able to speak to, understood why they were doing certain things. So why they weren't allowed to talk, why they had to sit in rows, why they had a fast-paced review at the start of a lesson. They knew exactly why things were happening. So I think that was quite incredible, and as I said, next sort of level. So we've got a few bigger key takeaways that Brad's going to talk us through, and then we can answer some questions.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I think really the consistency, precision, and clarity probably really sum up a lot of the takeaways. But it was an incredible experience, and I think many things we'll talk about, many of the takeaways, you would have seen snippets of it in some different classrooms in different areas, but this was just, I suppose, as Pat said, next level and consistent in every single classroom. So yeah, the first takeaway was definitely calm and orderly learning environments with very high expectations. So it was all about making children feel safe, secure, by having everything was very predictable, and the kids felt seemed quite motivated. So there's a very strong belief in both schools that all students are capable of achieving. So that real growth mindset was just, there's no differentiation was something we can talk about later, but yeah, all children are believed to be capable of learning, and whether that be academically, socially, emotionally, it's just a given that every child has the right to learn. It's so some of the things we saw, everything was very limited distractions. So in terms of classroom management, classroom arrangements, student placement, displays, the colour we saw in the rooms, all very minimal. So it's about less distractions for the teachers and less distractions for the kids. Definitely about having routines and processes, as Pat said, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, just like clockwork, absolute clockwork. And it really developed, even though saying that, there was a really positive classroom culture in every classroom that we saw, every classroom. And what I suppose we also noticed is so well organised, extremely tidy, uncluttered. Like it just looked immaculate. Every place you saw looked immaculate. So certainly high expectations for staff and for students. And we'll unpack a little bit of the expectations and some of the other takeaways. Thanks, Pat. So you would have, as Pat said, the routines, and he went through some of them. So they're very obviously big on cognitive load theory and their belief on whole school routines. So both schools, really, it's about minimising the effort on the minor things, the day-to-day stuff, and so allowing kids to really maximise their thinking goes into their learning. So very consistent, as Pat said, consistent exit, entry, transitions, distributing materials, going to the bathroom, getting a drink, behaviour management. Everything was just very scripted and very, very, very precise. They believe that, the whole idea of the routines is really about getting kids to the automaticity of just doing everything is very automatic, so they don't have to think about it. So it focuses on their learning, not about where my pencil is or what am I going to do next, or do I have to ask this question. It was all sort of well thought out. There was a belief in talking to some of the teachers too that they believe it really helps the students long run in terms of executive functions, in terms of being very organised, time management, prioritization and self-regulation become some of the effects that they've seen really improve, because the kids, it's quite regimented and the kids then become quite sort of organized themselves. Another thing they found too was the whole school routines. It really does reduce a lot of the anxiety and the stress, and really increases that sort of stability and I suppose it really improves the classroom climate having such fine routines. We at both schools we had the opportunity to sit with the kids at their meal times, because in England they provide lunch for the kids, and even that was so that we sat at tables with 6 kids. Number 1 set the table, number 2 served the food, number 2 collected the food, number 3 served the food, number 4 cleaned up, number 5 took all things, for number 6 wiped the table down. It was all very organized within a set period of time. And that's when I found, I was like, okay, kids, what do you really think of all this? You know, what do you really think? Because it was quite regimental. Every kid we spoke to said they love it. And I was surprised. I thought they're going to say, oh, you know, it was a bit this or a bit that. No, they really enjoyed it. They were like, they said there's no bullying. They know exactly what's expected of them at any minute in a lesson. They feel safe. They feel secure. So many of them commented, because they were both high schools, commented that they came from elementary schools or primary schools that were the opposite. And they said it was less chaotic, less hectic was the word a lot of them used, that they loved it because it wasn't hectic. So that's really goes back to that first takeaway about that calm and orderly. So that was really good. And it really links, this whole routine business really links to the classroom mastery work of Tim McDonald that a lot of our schools are now getting into as well. So that it actually links quite well to sort of all that science of learning, cognitive load as well. And yeah, a lot of this, because there's so many routines, as I said, some of the kids, it reduces the behaviour management issues. Like there was hardly, well, we never saw an issue, basically. And if there are then routines and structures that are in place for every single child, and they knew exactly what they were, they could tell you, and the teachers knew exactly what they were, and everyone follows it. Thanks, Pat. The emphasis on literacy, I think, you know, that's pretty much a given in a lot of schools. Certainly they were very big on the reading and the writing, but I think the big takeaway for me and for a lot of the principals, because we've talked about it quite a lot, is the whole focus on oracy. So very much on speaking and on listening. So it was very much speaking in terms of how you articulate things, how you offer your opinions, how you give information verbally. It was very, very structured as well. So everything is in full sentences. There's no just one-off answers or one words. It's actually in full sentences. And the listening is really about understanding ideas, being respectful of people. Some of the things we saw, so if the kids respond, they've got to stand. It's either an individual response or a choral response. I think it was at Arxone, as the kids went in, one teacher and the whole staff, then the whole kids joined in, read poetry. So the whole school was reciting poetry with these big blazing voices in this huge big meal hall. It was incredible. You got tingling moments, but it's all about that voice projection and things like that. The other thing we saw at both schools was they have what they call affirmations, where they'll give a topic and they'll say, you know, we want you to think of an affirmation for a specific subject or for something you've seen or whatever. It's a bit like a shout out sort of. And then so every child's got to have one. And then on the table, which we just sat there and watched in awe, every child goes around and my affirmation for today is my affirmation for today, and then they give each other feedback. That could be here's another word for that, or you could say that clearly. Don't forget to project your voice when you say it. Like they practice, so they go round and round until they feel they've got it right. We're talking 5 minutes, and then the teacher in charge calls, I think it was say 5 from the whole room, and the child would stand up and say, my affirmation today is blah 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 blah, and I'd like to thank so and so for and the whole explanation of everything. But it was all about obviously affirmation, but about voice projection and getting your voice across a room of, you know, hundreds of kids, and you could hear them clearly, and there was not an absolute whisper of a word from any other child. Even our staff, everyone just drops and listens. It was incredible. So yeah, so they really feel that the oracy is really big for obviously their academic growth. They commented a lot about their sort of that career future, because, you know, communication is so important in all areas of employment. So they feel it helps that. They believe it really forces kids in a way to that social engagement, especially the meal stuff. It also allows them, they feel because a lot of these kids are from disadvantaged areas, so they're very big on advocating for their causes, for their things that concern them in society. And these kids could really articulate certain issues very, very clearly. For kids that are from disadvantaged areas, it was incredible. And also too is about, you know, that cultural enrichment, understanding different perspectives, because a lot of the kids are from a range of different religions, different cultural backgrounds. So it's really about appreciating others. So yeah, the oracy was unbelievable. think the low variance curriculum is something that we've all sort of come across. As Pat said, a lot of the knowledge, the skills are all organised for teachers in the knowledge organisers. So all the heavy lifting is done for teachers. So it's done by the expert teachers, and then presented to staff to use. But then the staff have an input when it's been reviewed. So after they teach it, they review it, and then the people in charge then make the necessary changes. So teachers are very involved. There is collaboration, but in a different way. We walked into so many classrooms teaching the exact same unit, exactly the same way. The language was the same, the structures, the routines, everything was almost identical. All aligned to obviously their curriculum, all aligned to their routines, all aligned to their documentation. So really the focus for teachers is not so much on planning, but on preparation. And that was the difference. I think we spend so much time on planning, where they say, no, planning's done for you. We want you to spend time on preparing. So you know your stuff. The expectations, you just don't pick up the work, the knowledge, the information, the lesson plan or whatever, and walk in. You've got to know it back to front before you walk in the door. So that's the difference. It was very much about the preparation, not so much the planning in terms of therefore hours writing a unit of work. Scaffolds, there was lots of scaffolds, but not so much around the room. When we think scaffolds, we often think things for kids. In here, in the lessons, there were lots of scaffolds for teachers and supports for teachers. A lot of the work that we saw was content that was building upon previous lessons, so that, whole still aspiring curriculum. And the resources in them, as Pat, I think, said, it went down to questions, it went down to the materials, the resources used, this video, everything was the same. But the good thing about it is they are reviewed and renewed all the time. So they're not sort of stagnant things they pick up for 10 years. It's constantly updated. So that was great. This was a really good one. This blew us away too, actually. Very, very organised processes for inducting staff and students. So I can't remember which one it was now. One of them, I think the teachers come for I think a week or 2 weeks before school starts and are led through every single thing about the school. Led through the goals, the vision, the different commitments, their role statements, the policies, procedures, how they're to teach, all the routines are made clear to them, everything. So in great detail, how they're going to be observed, fed back, the big focus on continuous improvement. They're going to have mentors. It's all explained. So they have like a whole week of that where it's just drilled into them, so to speak. Quite formal, but it's all there. But for the kids, it's similar. The kids then also, your new students have a week before they start official school, and same thing. They are taught every single routine, all the consequences. So it's not only that sort of physical, there's the bathroom, there's the classrooms, but in terms of what the expectations for them are, their learning, routines, everything. It was just incredible. So basically when the first day of official school, everyone starts from, just goes straight for it. There's no warm-up times or anything. It's everyone straight into it. That whole thing of not wasting a minute is absolutely true. I think this is where a lot of our schools really got, a lot of our principals really got a lot of value, because we're obviously in this whole stage of instructional coaching and looking at how we're going to give feedback and observe. So it was really good. So both schools, it was just ingrained in what they do. It was part of their culture. There was no, I don't like doing that. I don't like people coming into my room. I'll just close the door. It was just people coming in and out is obviously something that just occurs all the time. And I think that, like I said, is part of that induction process. So it's really about continuous improvement and continuous learning. There's a culture. When they, like I said, recruited, their expectations there. It's constructive. It focuses on their skills as teachers, like what they're doing, what they're not doing. So that really instructional down to the the way they're projecting the voice, down to the signals they're giving, down to the routines they're using. So they're giving feedback on almost everything. But at the same time, it's quite personalised. So they have a mentor who will support them, and then a lot of feedback, practice, come back, let's have a look at it again, which is really good. Very contextualised to that particular classroom, that particular teacher. The big focus too, I think, is on that reflective practice of, so you get the feedback, okay, what did I do? How do I do it? How am I going to do it better next time? And there's a real, I suppose they crave it. That's what I think they came over with, is they really crave feedback. And a bit like you sort of see teachers in Asia sort of want the feedback, it's expected. Same thing there. And they really, especially young teachers, they don't have an issue, surprisingly, attracting teachers. They have teachers basically lining up at the door to get into their schools because of all the work that they're doing. So it was amazing. It was amazing to see. But yeah, so we talk a lot of this. Here's different ways of doing it. They had different ways of doing it. Some were quite simple. Some were just feeding back verbally. Some were sheets. Just depending on the school. But yeah, amazing. And there was just that sense of trust and respect and rapport across the staff, young and old. So younger learning from old, older learning from young. It was just there. There was no sort of division. It was very cohesive staff. It was great. So definitely something that we're taking back to a lot of our schools and looking at ways of doing that in our schools. I think Pat talked about attention to detail. Amazing. Basically, it's all about maximising learning. There's not a spare minute to waste time. Everything's very, very structured, very efficient. And that comes down to, training the PL. There's no ad hoc things. It's all part of that. It's very strategic thinking. It's all part of the master plan of the school. So the needs of the staff, needs of the student, very much focusing on pedagogy, instructional practices, assessment, not sort of the latest fad. It's all about what their target is as a school. Big focus on obviously, like all of us at the moment, on data. So they really know their data. They spend quite a bit of time looking at their data. So yes, everything has a purpose and intention. Everything is targeted. It's very, very, very strategic. Down to just every element of the school is just well thought out. Every element of every classroom, every element of every learning space, every staff room, every play area, because they're obviously restricted in some of their areas. They've really maximised time, space, and energy on everything. So definitely something to think about. The presence was as amazing. Their knowledge. So really, their presence is the teacher is definitely in charge. It's not a student-led classroom. The teacher is definitely the one in charge, and the students obviously know that. The teachers know that. Complete control by the teacher. Physical presence. There's lots of teachers obviously at the front leading, but there is lots of, due to the classroom layout, and they know where their students have been sat. There is movement around. Lots of supervision. Obviously instruction, but supervision, but also assessment on the spot assessment taking place all the time. And if they're not responding clearly enough, let's do it again. So yeah, very, very much that sort of cognitive load was big on with all the teachers. But what I suppose at one point I was a bit worried that, oh geez, maybe it's too clinical. Maybe this is all it's just about physical presence and control. But we saw during break times and during especially during the main sort of play times, some really fantastic, I suppose I call it emotional presence. They're really quite connected with the kids. I think it was Michaela had some lunchtime game thing going on. The teachers were right in there, having a great time. There was lots of laughter and fun. So you got a real sense that, yes, they're in charge, but there is some really good relationships in the schools, which I think is something that you may not always think about or see when you think about Michaela. The knowledge, very, very deep understanding of the content, of instructional practices, of accuracy. Also, too, they're well trained on what happens if there's an error, if a child mentions an error or something goes wrong, or there's a misconception, how to retrace the steps or go back to the certain parts of the lesson. Amazing. That was quite amazing, just the way they were able to do things. So definitely their knowledge is definitely around the instructional practice, and a lot of work goes into obviously coaching and everything around that. In terms of the dedication, like I said before, just the commitment to growth, it was huge. Obviously, basically they can take the best of the best, and that's pretty much what they've got. They've also quite invested in young teachers. So if they get some young teachers, then they really, really develop the teachers. So a lot of the teachers that were at Arc Zone were at Michaela. So basically, if you work at Michaela, you pretty much get a job anywhere. You're that highly regarded. So they do a lot of work on that. But a lot of it is, the dedication of teachers, the desire to improve, definitely going above and beyond. Like we have snippets of those teachers in our schools. We're talking a whole staff of those gun teachers. Big investment in the kids. They really do spend time with their kids, not just academically, but like I said, emotionally, sort of socially. They're really keen to help them, and that whole dedicated to really grow Yeah, and there was one teacher I spoke to on duty, and he said he waited a couple of years before he could get in. To get there, he just kept applying for a job because it's where he wanted to be, and he said it's just been the most amazing learning experience that he's ever had. So, yeah, absolutely, those things are important. Nearly finished. Yeah, high accountability, high support for both teachers and students. I think I've sort of mentioned that before. Definitely high level expectations. That's just around performance, assessment, responsibility for growth. You know, we often say it's the kids' responsibility. It's the students' responsibility, but it's also the teacher's responsibility to ensure that those students are growing. And why aren't they? What's not causing what's happening with the data? But it's also high support for obviously professional learning, their coaching, observations, instructions. There's also a lot of support for students with needs. You don't see it as probably as openly as we would see in a lot of our schools, but it's definitely there. So lots of support for both kids and teachers. And really, it's all about, you know, there's so many policies and procedures in place. We have very clear expectations the whole time, and they're really about it being equitable for everybody, no matter what your postcode is or what your background is. They take in some ways, no notice of your background, you know, but in a positive way. Like, it doesn't matter where you come from, we're going to treat you all the same, all equally. And that was really important, I think, for some of those kids to be treated equally the same as everyone else. Because especially Michaela's in Wembley, it's quite a poor area. So, but you wouldn't know it. Those kids were just all very well dressed, well groomed. Everything was amazing. And I think lastly, I think the other thing that we really liked, because it was so structured and so rigid in some ways, was that they're constantly revising, reviewing for the next year. So like I said, everything is prepared for the teachers, but they have input into the next iteration of it. So they're learning from experiences. They're very keen to adapt and fine tune for the following year. There's no sort of adaptation on the spot because you're following the lesson design, if you like, but there's feedback and fine tuning afterwards, which is super. But yeah, continuous improvement, and they're really about learning from experiences and really about improving their own performance, but also about improving the success of the kids. So yeah, sort of 10 key takeaways that were just, yeah, it was just mind blowing. To see, you know, hundreds of kids walking in dead silence, in knowing exactly where to go, where to be, teachers following the script, all teachers doing it. There's not one sort of rogue, so to speak. Everyone is sort of following the same game plan. It was just incredible to see. But yeah, for me, it was certainly talking to the kids and getting sort of their honesty and their, you know, one girl did say, she says, I don't like the fact that we've got to, everywhere they go, they've got to have basically hands on elbows, the arms on, like they've got to sit sort of like this everywhere. That's what they've got to do. So I get a bit sick of that because I get, you know, sometimes I just want to sit on my hand or something. So, but other than that, it's quite funny. Everyone else was just spot on. So, but yeah, the kids were really lovely, really engaged, and obviously very used to people coming. Michaela, they only have set times that they do it. But the kids are just so used to people coming and going, and very, very proud of their school. So no, it was an amazing experience. So definitely, if you get a chance to get over there to visit a few of these schools, I would have liked to have seen primary. They were both high school, and I think if I go again, I'd like to see some primary schools as well. All right, Pat, plug it.
There. No, good one. Thank you. And yes, just on that point, yeah, they were both secondary. From talking to those some of the experts and some of the policy sort of makers over there, it seemed the impression we got was things are going really well in the secondary space there, so better than us, I suppose. But in the primary, they've still got a bit of work to do from what it sounded like. They've had a big focus, as you probably already know, around more so initiated from sort of more around the phonics aspect, which then has branched out more into sort of other components of reading, more science of reading, and sort of opening up conversations and sort of direction. But early on, 10 years ago, it was quite phonics based in the primary, and where secondary have sort of taken more a science of learning sort of approach, which is where they're sort of bringing in aspects around high impact teaching practice and etc. But so just before we have questions, yes, so this trip was coordinated by Knowledge Society, and there is another trip being planned for this year. So if you are interested, please just connect there's an expressions of interest there and Knowledge Society will get in contact with you. Eleanor Douglas, the CEO, has worked with us over the last few years as a strategic partner through Catalyst, and last year we asked them to put together a trip for us. There was, I think, maybe 10 or 12 of us from memory, Brad, so people from the office as well as principals who connected, and then we had Max representatives from Melbourne Archdiocesan Catholic Schools also attended with us, and others from across the country. And so, yeah, another trip being organised. So if you are interested, please have a look into that further. Hopefully I'll have the chance to head back over. We'll see. But yeah, so that's so that was really just sort of our key takeaways, and hopefully you've got something out of that. Let me
just saying too, Pat, it was the trip was not only about schools, it was also we went to was it the Education Festival? Is that what they called it?
Yeah.
That was a 2-day festival. That's where we saw, the Tom Boxers and the Kirschners and things, which was amazing. And that was like it was like a conference, but it was like a festival. So there were lots of stalls and theatre rooms that you'll go into. There was a cocktail bar, which we thought was quite a good idea. That was really good. And then we also went to Cheshire to the research ed as well. So there was lots of, not only did we visit schools, there were lots of PD opportunities, and obviously the networking, talking to different people. We had different meetings with different, with some of those people that Pat mentioned earlier, the Ambition Institute, the Ofsted. It was just, it was more than just school visits, and so that sort of really well-rounded conversations. And I think the best thing is that the group that went, especially this group from our system, are now just become all tight, and we're talking all the time about things, and we're going to catch up for dinner in a couple of weeks to celebrate. So yeah, it's definitely worth doing. Highly recommend it.
So yeah, truly, if there's any questions that people would have, and please feel free to reach out afterwards, with our emails and contact, and continue the conversation if you had other things that you wanted to ask. And I will just say also, more broadly, not necessarily about the trip, but just in terms of what we're doing with Catalyst and supporting our schools. Of course, we do also want to pay that forward as well, and support in any way that we can with anybody across education in Australia. So if there are things that we can share, with some of the work that we're doing, if you're doing this by yourself, and you're fortunate to have a group of like-minded people in this network, but please feel free to reach out with anything in terms of teaching and learning. We would love to talk some more and learn some more from yourself. But yes, if there's any questions about the trip, I'm not sure if people wanted to jump in or put in the chat, or there might not be any questions, which is fine.
Hi.
Hi, Tina.
Hi, Tina.
Hi, that was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing it. It was very rich and really interesting. I'm at ACU, and I'm just a teacher, so I'm a lecturer here, but I'm essentially a teacher. And I'm really interested to know, what was the background for this school? Who was the brainchild? Who was the person who created this whole system, and how long has it been going for?
So Michaela, I think they're up to their 10th year this year, so 9 years when we went. So she was, I think, an assistant principal in a school, and I think, from my understanding, wanted to really go this way, but I think pretty much got told she wasn't allowed to, and pretty much got kicked out, didn't she? I think, Pat. So then she decided to start her own school. So she
Called it after herself.
No. I don't think it's actually named after her, but it's named after. There was a story where it was named Michaela. Can't remember it now. But do you know?
I think it was a school she visited overseas, and the lady was Michaela that ran the school.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Shay.
Hi.
And it was just So she's the one that started this, basically her way or no way, really. And I think that was a good thing about that. When it comes back to those teachers, it's made very clear that this is the expectation, and she's very open to saying, look, maybe this isn't the right school for you. rather than cuts them off, she'll, okay, I'll support you moving where you want to go. Let's look for another job. So she's very, yeah, she was an amazing person to listen to. Very, very passionate about what she's doing and passionate about the school that she's got and why she's got it, but is also very supportive of people that maybe that's not right for. But it's either my way. If you don't like it, that's fine. Go. Same for kids. It's not the way you want parents, not the way you want to do it. So yeah.
And it's interesting because there are different views around Catherine, but she is she's very committed. This is what she believes, and she's drawing from the research and drawing from the evidence and science, and her commitment is really something to admire, and putting the needs of the students and the supports around the teachers, but not dropping that accountability or that expectation for anyone. And it's got her into a little bit of trouble in the past, but she's very committed to maintaining a high expectation for learning in that school, and the same at Arclone, same thing, that really strong commitment, and so I think they cop it a little bit, perhaps from others who might not believe the same as what they believe, but no deviating, really strong dedication.
It
And
sounds
very
like a common trait.
very passionate about kids from disadvantaged areas too. So the whole area is quite disadvantaged. So that's another reason why she started it. So she treats everyone equally. There were definitely children there with special needs and on the spectrum and things, but you didn't necessarily notice them. No one's withdrawn. They're part of every day. And because they're so routine and structured, those kids are quite okay because they know exactly what's going to happen all the time. You could pick them out, and there was certainly some sort of with that emotional presence with kids. Sometimes you could see the teacher going up and calming a particular student, but because the students are so routine, they sort of just, it was amazing to see. Yeah,
that was my next question. Yep. Sorry, about students who may have been what we would call struggling students or students with dyslexia, or how they managed and how the other students. It sounds like the other students would have been very respectful. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how that was handled. That's one thing, but also what the cost is of this school.
It's free school. They're free.
Wow,
it's fun. It's free.
And the support it was interesting. So really, when we talk about the differentiation, it was more around the support. So differentiating sort of the support that was needed for different children. So, but not so much, there wasn't differentiation around the curriculum in terms of what students were learning. It was the way in which they supported and responded. We saw in some settings, in some of the classrooms, there was small groups and individual work that was occurring, but it wasn't as a replacement for core instruction. So it was sort of value adding to the instruction that was occurring. There were a lot of adults around, a lot of adults who were supporting, not so much in the classrooms, but particularly around transition time. There seemed to be just more presence of adults in lunch break rooms, like in sort of the big hall. Everyone was sort of expected. The duties was interesting and very different around sort of the EA. We're sort of bound by a little bit in terms, but all teachers were on playgrounds. You didn't really notice when teachers were having a break, but there were really high scaffolded support. So like Brad mentioned, we would see that teacher walk next to a student and just put their hand on their shoulder. They obviously picked up on some signs that they needed to sort of be a bit more presence for that child. So there's a lot of that sort of social support that was occurring, but then there were still the interventions that were occurring, but their belief was around, Brad mentioned before, but all students who can succeed. So we weren't starting from a place of differentiation. We weren't starting from a place of what do these 30 children need, and then we've got 30 different things happening. It was, no, this is what this is what all need. We'll focus on core instruction, make sure that is, you know, to the point of close to perfection, and then we will respond accordingly to really challenge and support. So we saw that still happening. We saw in terms of the questioning that was asked, while it was, you know, really active participation, non-volunteer teachers talked about, you know, that they knew how to, you know, sort of work that to make sure that they were engaging those students out, and they could push those students, but then, you know, understanding those students that might not have been able to respond, you know, as perhaps in, you know, the detail that that others could. Yeah, so we saw that. They were really active. Teachers were working extremely hard. There was a lot. There was a lot happening, but everybody, the students, we didn't see, you know, any really any off-task behaviour. When we would start to see something, you would see a teacher move to that child or move to that space. So even on the playground, you know, students weren't allowed to gather in massive groups, because when you gather in massive groups and there's issues that occur, so you know, it was smaller groups, and if there was a group sort of forming of, you know, 6 or 8 students, high school kids sort of gathering and talking, it was a teacher would walk over there and sort of move the group and break the group down into smaller groups. So all the children we spoke to, and not just the ones that they allowed us to speak to, others that we sort of caught, you know, sort of walking through corridors and those sort of things and chatting, all felt really well supported. They all spoke of being really calm. The school was calm. They knew what was expected of them. They knew there was no bullying. Yeah, it was actually that side of things was very impressive. But you know, in terms of that, I don't know how the funding works necessarily. I don't know where the staffing allocation, all those sort of details. You know, that's all there. They obviously made it work, and whether they, you know, there's always a trade-off. Whether they, you know, there was priorities placed for what was happening there, and that meant that other things couldn't happen. Perhaps.
And we're talking traditional schools. We're talking, you know, an office block that's turned into a school internally, and then outside what might have been the car park is the playground. You know, with certain things put there and play spaces created, but it's not a traditional school as we think it. You think central London, outskirts of London, office block, and really what, you know, often some of the old car park turns into the playground. So the very different context of schools. Arc Zone that we had, because that's a brand new one, modelled off Michaela. So there's the school, and above the school, so on top of the school, is apartment blocks. So, and most of the kids live in the apartments. So
Wow.
they just go downstairs and they're at school. So yeah, I think both schools said most kids live within 1 kilometre of the school or something. Like we're talking that dense. Incredible.
That is extraordinary. I've seen things like that in the States. I haven't seen it in the UK, but you just have to wonder how it was created and how they have time to do everything and how they have the funding to have enough people to actually create those systems. I mean, you must have been on the way back on the plane going, how do we do that? How do we get every principal on the same page? How do we, you know, which parts are going to go forward with?
That's where Ofsted was interesting, because they do all the compliance and registration type of thing, and that's another whole different ballgame than what we're used to. So there's quite strict conditions to have a school, and they work in, like you're linked to, like I suppose we're linked to like a system or a diocese or a state department. They're linked to academies or trusts. So there's a trust may have a group of schools, or an academy may have a group of schools. So it's a completely different system. Didn't make any sense to me, but what you saw was like, wow. I mean, at these particular schools anyway.
Thank you so much. That was great. Some other people must have questions. I feel bad. I could keep just chatting to you.
Anytime.
And I'm just conscious of everyone's time too. But yes, if you do have any questions, jump in. Otherwise, we can take them offline.
I'm actually here to thank you for tonight, Patrick and Brad. But I've got some key takeaways. I loved listening to you both, and your presentation was awesome. my biggest takeaway was how wonderful it is for inclusion, and how often people look at Catherine Birbalsingh and those schools and think that it's so teacher-led and that the students are just there doing as they're told. I feel like with the science of reading, we teach for dyslexia because it's good for everybody. And in these schools, we're teaching routines and expectations in the science of learning because automaticity is so good for everybody. It's so good for all of our students who are funded, who struggle at school, who have high stress and anxiety. It's a leveling of the playing field, and it reduces inequality in our schools. And I just think it's amazing. I feel like from what you've said, it's such a team-oriented space between teachers and students. Students feel heard. They feel quite psychologically safe in the classroom to be expressing themselves and to come to school and to learn. So, and I loved the outside stuff because I'm always trying to break up big groups.
I think it was no more than, don't correct, I think it was no more than 6 were allowed to congregate together, I think.
Right. I'm bringing that in tomorrow with rubbish bags. I just am in awe of Catherine Birbalsingh. I've got all of her books. And just for everybody listening, there is actually a documentary about her on Vimeo, and it's about 90 minutes. Costs about $7, but you get to keep it. And I can't tell you how many times I've watched it. So for some of us, that's as close as we'll get. But now that I know that there's another tour, I'll be talking to my husband later.
Can you put that in the chat, Shay?
Yeah, absolutely. But just from our perspective in Read Ballarat, like, we're doing so much to try and bring this cohesiveness and these routines into our schools, and for you guys to come on and share your experience has just been wonderful. So thank you so much for coming tonight.
Oh, our pleasure. And thank you for all that you're doing as well. And as I said, anything that we can do to keep the conversation going and to share with you and to learn from you, we would love that. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and don't hesitate to contact us. You've got our details. No questions too silly. We're very much happy to help.
And we'll send you the slides as well. Yeah,
strategic point of view from all of those things, because Pat and I are involved in different ways. Pat's the teaching and learning. I'm more the leadership behind it. So all good. More than happy.
Which is another thing. Good on you. Like, leadership, leading properly from the top. That's, it's amazing. Thank you.